Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Patty Giarrusso, and this is Let's Talk Pets on Society Bites Radio. Today, we welcome back to the show Brigid Watson from Mission Reunite and First Street Pets. And Brigid was here last month with us, and she talked about using cams to help find your lost cat. And in our interview, we kind of talked about humane trapping. So I thought it would be a good idea to bring her back so she could talk about that. Because when your cat is missing and has been seen in the area, might be hiding under someone's shed or deck, it may be time for you to set a humane trap. And a humane trap is just a simple tool to use so you can get your cat back home safely. Many people don't know how to do it. They don't know what it is. So Brigid's going to talk about that with us today. And Brigid's a lifetime animal care and welfare professional, and she is a retired animal shelter director and has been a professional pet sitter since 1994. She's the president of Mission Reunite, which is a nonprofit dedicated to missing pet prevention and recovery. Brigid works to educate and engage animal shelter leadership, staff, and volunteers, and their rescue partners, along with pet sitters, veterinarians, and other animal care professionals for community-wide solutions to animal welfare issues. Along with her work at Mission Reunite, Brigid writes and shares life-saving information and tips through her First Street Pets blog and Facebook page. Welcome back to the show, Brigid.
Thank you, Patty. I'm so pleased to be with you here again and to talk about this important topic.
Yeah, and I want to wish you happy Professional Pet Sitters Week coming up next month. Me and Mary Overdeer just talked about that last week.
All right. Great.
So why don't you start telling us about, using humane traps to help find your lost cat?
Sure. So I think the most important thing to think about is, when is this the appropriate tool? Because like with any tool, it's appropriate for some situations and not for others. Now, a mistake that I see a lot of people making is when their cat goes missing, they get a trap or several traps and they just set them all over the place. There's no plan. So you are not likely to be successful by doing that. So the time to use a humane trap is when either you know where your cat is, but you can't catch him, or you think you know where he is. So let's say you've had sightings from somebody in the neighborhood has definitely seen your cat, reported it to you, maybe taken a picture, or maybe you've used your security camera and you've gotten some footage, but the cat doesn't come out when you're there or runs away when you try to catch him. Or it could also be used if you are not sure where your cat is, but you kind of want to check and see if you think he might be in your backyard or someplace safe like that. But the main thing is you don't want to just set traps all over the place.
Right. So why don't you talk about some of the mistakes? You said that there are definitely mistakes that people make when, just jumping in and trying to set a trap and not really knowing what they're doing. So why don't you talk about that?
Sure. So, of course, when someone is distraught and their pet is missing, they're going to pull out all the stops. So they may try and do everything at once and hope that will work. So with a humane trap, some of the mistakes that people make are, as I mentioned, just setting it any old where, just putting it out and hoping for the best, or perhaps using it as the only tool. For example, not checking at the shelter, not talking to your neighbors. You want to cover all bases, as we've talked about in our other interviews, of all the possibilities of what could have happened to your cat. And another thing that folks want to be aware of is the weather. So, of course, it's going to depend on where you are. If you're in a very cold climate where it's snowing and freezing, you obviously don't want to just leave traps out in that kind of weather. If you are in a hot climate like Arizona and it's 115 in the summer, even a few minutes in a trap can be harmful or fatal to an animal. So there's a lot to it, which is why I recommend that you learn about it yourself, listen to this interview, read my article, but before going out on your own and doing this, consult someone who already knows how to do this. And those are usually like TNR groups, folks who trap cats for neutering, or cat rescue groups. They will usually have traps and have people who know how to do it. They may even do it for you, or they can at least teach you the proper ways to use the trap.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Where would somebody go about getting a trap? I know here locally, our Humane Society will rent them out. Our animal shelter will sometimes set one for you if they have some available, but they don't always have them available. So the TNR groups, I hadn't thought about that before, but obviously that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And they're often staffed by volunteers who want to help. And anytime I get a chance to interact with folks from groups like that, I'll talk to them about this subject. And most of them, they want to help people in any way they can. And especially in the off season, because there's times where you're doing more trapping than others, so they may not be super active out in the field. So they may have traps sitting around. They may have people with time to spare to assist the owner of a missing pet, and that way you wouldn't have to buy a trap. But there are traps available for purchase, of course, on Amazon. It's kind of tough when you can't see them because some are really good and some are really cheap. It's kind of hard to use. Many feed stores will have them, a feed and pet store, or if you have a Tractor Supply or something like that, it'll often have a picture of a raccoon on it or something like that. But you can buy them pretty inexpensively at a store, especially if they're on sale. And again, it may not be the greatest quality, but you only need to use it once.
Right. So how do you feel about this? Would you suggest that if somebody's in a lost pet group on Facebook, that maybe they ask if somebody knows how to trap, and then tell me if everybody, like you've got 5 people, oh yeah, I do. How would the pet owner go about assuring themselves that somebody saying, yes, I can help, can actually do it and know what kind of questions would they want to ask them or something, just to be sure that they know what they're doing and that these situations, of having possibly your pet get deceased if you're in the desert, for instance, to help that doesn't happen?
That's a really good point. And I think that there's a couple things that the pet owner needs to do. And again, it's hard when you're distraught and looking for a missing pet. It's not like you're looking for someone to, do some yard work for you where you'd be more logical in asking the questions. But it is important to stop and do that. So I think number one would be finding out what group this person is with. Are they just an individual who likes animals and has a trap, or are they with a group? I would definitely prefer to go with someone who's been doing this for a long time, because I know a lot of people who do TNR, and they've trapped hundreds, if not thousands, of cats. So they've got it down to a science. They know exactly what to do and how to do it safely. Another thing is I would want to be part of the process. You don't just want to turn this over to somebody else. I would want to meet them, talk about where we're going to put the trap or traps, and how it will be monitored. And that's really key, is that you don't want to just set it and forget it. The trap needs to be monitored, whether you are physically there looking at it or setting a camera or something like that. You don't want to just leave these things unattended for hours and all day.
Right. Yeah, I mean, speaking to that point, we had a person who lost their cat. She was traveling through the area and lost her cat in Venice near the beach. And she had, I don't know if she bought a trap or how it got set, but whoever did it did not have a plan. And they did not talk about whether she did it herself or whoever set it up didn't talk about the monitoring and how important that was. And it went unmonitored for a couple of days, and the cat wasn't found in it, but a possum and babies were found in it, and some of them died, because they were left in there. Yeah, so I'm glad you're mentioning the importance of monitoring it.
Yes. Yeah, and even there are laws about that. Even if folks are trapping animals with the intent of killing them, trapping for nuisance animals, trapping for hunting, even then there are laws requiring you to check the traps every so many hours, because even if that's your intention, the animals can't be left to suffer in the traps. So obviously, if it's your pet, a domestic animal, you certainly don't want to leave them in there, and you don't want to catch other animals, as in that case. You could have a skunk spray in your trap. You could have the possum, as you mentioned, or any other animal who could injure itself or die in the trap. So you definitely don't want to do that. You always want to have them attended. Now, I know what some of the cat trappers do if they're trying to catch a cat to get spayed. Sometimes they'll park their car nearby so they can kind of keep an eye on it, but the cat doesn't see them. Now, obviously, not everybody can do that all day long, but if it's a cat that they've seen, they see around, but it's kind of trap savvy, that's one of the things that can be done, is you can physically watch, but you're kind of out of sight, so the cat doesn't know you're there. And another thing, as I mentioned, is using the camera. If you can put the trap right in front of the camera, if it's at a location where the camera will work, as we discussed, with electricity and an internet connection, then you can get a ping as soon as there is movement, and that will probably alert you that someone is in the trap or has at least walked near the trap.
Right. Now, using the camera, we just recently had a situation with a dog, not a cat, but it was a small dog, and she did a hunting cam. What do you call that? The kind that
the trail camera.
Yeah, the trail cam. And it alerted her, when there was movement, and she set it, and thank goodness, this poor little thing, because it was like 16 years old.
Wow.
It got right in there, and she sent me a picture right away of it, of the
That's
trail
great.
cam. And it must have been a nice trail cam because it took a great picture. But yeah, it was immediate that, she got that ping right away and was able to get that. And we did have another situation, and I think mentioning the true stories helps people understand that the trapping of kitties does really work good. We had another lady whose cat was missing like a week, and it had somehow decided it was going to spend some time under its neighbor's shed, and it was afraid to come out for one reason or another. Maybe it got scared there by something, and so I told her, get a trap, and you can get, in this case, she got it from the animal services, and they set it up for her, and within less than a day, her kitty was safe, so
that's great.
They work pretty good in situations like that, and if you do it right and know the steps, that's why it's important to talk about it. But let's talk about something that I know is especially important with dogs, and maybe it is as important, or maybe it isn't, with cats, and that would be keeping where you put the trap private. You don't want to announce to people where it is and that. Now, why don't you talk about that a little bit and why that's important?
Right. That's a good point. So with kitties, you can have a couple of responses. Basically, you don't want anyone from the public who doesn't understand what you're doing to interfere with your traps. Now, one thing that I have seen happen is that maybe people think the animals are going to be trapped and killed or taken to a shelter. So anytime they'll see a trap, they'll trigger it. And so rescue people will set all these traps, and then they're all closed and no cats. So they know that somebody sabotaged them, or whatever their reasons are. This is just an assumption that I would think. So what worked for those rescue groups in my area, they were doing a lot of trapping after the fires because there were cats, entire neighborhoods were burned to the ground, and there were cats that were still there. So they were trying to get the cats out and identify ones that had been reported missing and get them back to their people who were now staying with friends or relatives or who had moved to another city. So they made up some signs, which they posted around the traps, because a lot of people were kind of looky-loos. They wanted to look at the burned-down houses. So it was impossible to keep these things hidden because there was nowhere to hide them. It was kind of out in the open. So they made some signs that basically said, this is what we're doing. We're trapping. These are people's lost pets. We're trying to get them reunited. Please don't disturb the trap.